evening, everyone. My name is Leah Bailey, and I'm joined today by some special guests from the series From Yard that is now streaming on Tubi. So, before we begin, I would like you guys to introduce yourself and the character that you play.
Hi, my name is Shevrado Oliver, and I play the role of Dave in From Yard.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Herrera, and I play the role of Ramon Diaz, partner of Dave Heron.
So, it has been a really, really long road. You guys filmed 2 years ago, and now From Yard is finally premiering on Tubi. It's streaming on Tubi. So, how does it feel to see it come to life?
Long time coming, tell you that much. Um, for me personally, I mean, I've seen other projects that I've done on TV, but to have this one come on TV, it was a glimmer of hope to see this work come alive. Um, you know, between myself and Chev and other castmates, we spent a great amount of time rehearsing, diving into the psychological parts of the character. And this is like a biopic, pretty much. So, these are real people that actually existed. Um, I never, fortunately, got to meet Diaz, but was told a lot of anecdotes about him. And one of the ways how I landed this part was just through a phone interview. They saw my headshot, the writer and one of the creator and one of the writers, and it was during COVID. And next thing you know, 2 hours into that conversation, we want to offer you the part of Diaz. You sound like him, you look like him, and that's the best. That's the best type of compliment, where you can kind of just infuse some of your own traits into the character and make it your own. So you're not just doing mimicry. For me as an actor. But yeah, it was a blast just watching it, and having my family also view it and see the work, at hand. So.
Well, for me, I think when you're able to see anything that you've worked on with the process, with everything that you put into creating that character come to life, it's always something that you're proud of. And for all of us in this biopic, it's a little different because when you're playing a role that was written for you or was written, with just the imagination of a writer, you're gonna play it, you're gonna create a backstory, you're gonna create motivations, you're gonna create a three-dimensional universe, you're gonna inhabit that, you're gonna do the work. With Dave, he's real, he's alive, he has a past, he has family, people who can actually use points of references to say, hey, that's not how he was, or that's how he was. So for me, being able to do that work and to be told by him that it brought back a memory because it was so realistic, or to be told by family of him that, yo, that is the most meaningful compliment, and to see it out there where other people, other family, people in Jamaica who couldn't be at the premieres in New York or wherever, they can now see it. I'm happy.
So, on that topic of playing characters that exist in real life, I would like to throw out this question for the both of you. So I'll start with Joe. Um, how did you prepare for the role of playing a parole officer for the show? Because I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of intricacies to it. Did you get any help? How much of the character was you, and how much of it did you take on from what you were told about the real Diaz?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think there is not one route to approaching a character. I'm a firm believer of that, and I think for me, um, when I was offered the part, I had a coach in LA that I was zooming in with, and then this was just an opportunity for me to kind of something that I booked, something that I have, and now I can kind of prior to that I was just doing scenes, but now with this coach, he was able to help me kind of take the character description that I was given, and imbue not only the character description with it, but also put a little part of me in there, because the truth of the matter is, in any character you play, I'm a firm believer that um, I don't necessarily put on a character. I think you find the character within you. That's my mentality in it. So if Diaz was a tough, badass, then I'm gonna find that tough badass quality within me, within Joe. And truth be told, growing up in the Lower East Side, the six boroughs, what I call it, in New York City, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so for me, it wasn't too much of a far stretch to kind of dip into what that was, that atmosphere, that ambiance, and tap into some of my personal experiences and bring it into the correlation of this part. And so for me, it became a symbiotic kind of union of myself with Diaz. The challenge was to kind of make him more three-dimensional and not just play him tough and he was a hard nose, but to find his humanity. And so that's where my coach and I, we would explore, well, what's the human side of this character? And this is a guy who grew up in these streets as well. And so a lot of my own biography I would share with my coach, and we would talk about, well, what was it like growing up in New York City during the 80s and 90s. I was a teen in my 80s, and in my 90s, I was a young man in my 20s. So I started to go back into my own past, and always in the 80s, New York City wasn't always great. It was looking over your shoulder, and there was a lot of gangs around where I grew up, and I grew up in the projects as a kid. So that lifestyle was definitely something that I tapped into, and I was able to bring that edginess that he was, but that the reason why he was a certain way was in order to enhance his city, enhance his hometown. There was always something positive. He just went about it in a very unorthodox way. And the character of Diaz had some issues too, in terms of substance abuse, alcoholism. He would, drink on the job and things like that. And so I had to kind of wrestle with that and find what was his reasoning behind that. He didn't grow up with a dad. I fortunately did grow up with a father. And my father was a great man. He's no longer with us, but he was a great man. He had his flaws. And so I was able to kind of tap into that and figure out, well, what's the connection for me to make that personal connection of why he feels a certain way about his father, his family. So it was a lot of research in terms of not only the character, but myself, and fusing those two elements together. And I think when you do that, you're not playing a character, you're being the character, in my opinion. So
Yep.
that's pretty much how and then you play off of somebody like Chev and the other castmates, where it becomes this authentic response, and you're not playing, you're just talking, conversing, and just having the dialogue. And then there's these pickup cues that you see in each other behavior wise that then comes across in the scene. Oh yeah.
I really love that answer. I really love how, you sought the traits that you had within yourself to also apply to the character instead of like only relying on like the character's traits, and build up to that. And so for Chev, you also play, a parole officer, and you also play, young adult, early adult. So, what was that like playing those characters and getting yourself prepared for that role?
Well, it was pretty interesting because when I got cast for the project, I was living in Jamaica, so that was my reality. I lived there. I grew up there. I spent more time in Jamaica than the actual Dave did. He left when he was 14. So a lot has happened since then, and I've had to like put myself in his shoe of, okay, you're now an immigrant in the US at 14. I remember when I was 14 in Jamaica, the joy of being able to go to the beach with your friends, to, just enjoy the tropics, right? Now you were just ripped from that at 14, and you're like a transplant in the Bronx, right? I've been to the Bronx, so I know it's not the same. So I had to think about, how does that change you as a person, right? How do you feel moving from that tropical island to the cold, dealing with new friends, dealing with, whatever challenges that came? How does that help or hurt your development? Then, as it relates to the parole part of it, I did a lot of research. I had to figure out what was their MO when they're on the job. What would a parole officer be thinking about? Were these perps dangerous? How would you like weigh, should I try to apprehend this guy who is a repeat offender? Like, am I gonna make it home? So the anxieties, the worries, the fears, the joy, I had to figure that out. And then, knowing Dave, I had to find his nuances and inject that into the role, because I've been talking to him. I've been watching him on the Zoom, how he reacted. Then I had to say, okay, now I have to dial it back, because I'm meeting him as a guy in his 60s. So what you're seeing is somebody in his late 20s to 30s. So I have to find the authenticity in what he is now, and then date it, because he's not going to move with the same vigor that a young man would move now. But you have to find that authenticity and say, okay, do it that way. It was a challenging but fun experience. And I think just arriving at the essence of who he was at that time was like the most important thing, to make sure that you get and capture the small details about his life. And as Joe said, when you bring that into the scene and you start just being, right, like, it just works out. Because if Joe captured the essence of Diaz and I'm working on the essence of Dave, the way that they were together would be organic. And I think we kind of captured that, so it felt good.
Yeah, one of the things that our director, even during the Zoom, he kept mentioning, he would always look at these two figures as fire and ice, fire and ice, fire and ice. And so that was another image that was very helpful, because it kept us in our, for sounding, acting nerdy here, archetypes, right? Um, and and to really kind of stay in that. I'm a firm believer that the character, on the outside stays the same, in a picture, but in the interior changes. And if you can find those interior subtleties, those changes, and there's a scene that Chev and we have where he kind of, I felt as Diaz that he was usurping Diaz's authority over this one perp, and we had a confrontation. And so it was well, who was going to have that the it was a power struggle. So who's gonna win out? Who's gonna win out? And Dave, the character of Dave, has had such a way with Diaz where it was almost like, I hate to say it, but almost like he knew what buttons to kind of press in order to reel him back in, because Diaz was can be a loose cannon, and yeah, so that scene was always fun to play. I know we were both dying to play that scene on set,
yeah.
because
Oh
every
yeah.
time we played it on Zoom, it was just
Oh yeah.
you know
Fireworks, man.
yeah.
I remember that scene and how intense it was. When I was watching, I was like, oh no, like, is this the end of like their partnership? And I feel like in that moment, it came down to those characters making a choice
Mhm.
that would shape their lives and shape how they go about doing their job.
Right.
So, with that in mind, did, in terms of the choices we make shaping our lives, did portraying your roles make you reflect on choices in your own journey?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like the thing with being an adult, right? It's understanding that there is cause and effect. There is this duality that will never not cease to be, right? It will always be here. So growing up, there are things that meant a lot to me. And I would be like, oh my God, I can't live without this. This is not like you just feel like this is just the one thing that you can't do without. And then 10 years, 20 years down the line, you're like, but this wasn't nothing. This wasn't anything that I needed to be this worked up about. And then you kind of grow and you learn how to prioritize. You learn how to just react and act according to the, you know, to what's happening. So I had to reflect on my own life, growing up in Jamaica, some of the things that I wanted to do that I did, some of the things that I never did, should have done them. And then it made me reconcile that, okay, I am where I'm supposed to be. Everything that happened in my life happened for a reason. It brought me to this point. I am a sum of all my life experiences, right? As we are all. So for the good and for the bad, be grateful you're alive. So it kind of made me feel like that, because looking back at how Diaz and Dave had to literally risk their life to do what they had to do, and they're both alive now, and they're both able to tell these stories. I mean, how could you feel any way different? You know what I mean?
And that that makes me think of another question, especially with being in the scenario that they are in,
Mhm.
risking their lives, interacting with people within their community, seeing how the people in their community is changing and having that conflict within, in terms of how can I help this person? And so I have another question in mind, but I want to ask Joe the same question as well. How have the characters in the roles that, I mean, the role that you played as Diaz, how has that made you reflect on the choices in your own journey in life?
Um, well, it definitely, hindsight is 2020. So for me,
Mhm.
um, I was a young man during the 90s. So maybe Diaz was about 10 years older than me during the 90s, 10 or 15 years older than me. But for me, the choices I made, Diaz, I always felt was a product of his environment.
Mhm.
He did make a choice though. And the choice was to, instead of um, going down the route of gangs and the negativity of that route, he chose to want to help. And I think that's, for me, that's where we kind of share similarities. I always felt, growing up in the Lower East Side, and in rough area projects. Um, I always wanted to be better. I always wanted to not be better because I thought that I was better than people, but I wanted to improve not only myself, but then be a beacon of hope for others. I'm a man of faith as well, so I always go back to, you know, how can I be a light to other people? And I think Diaz was always striving to be that. He just was very limited in his understanding of, at least at the time, he was very limited in understanding how can he be that, and he only knew one way, and that was the tough way. Um, it was, and I grew up in that type of era where My father was a disciplinarian, you know, and so tough love, and um, it's how I was raised, you know. So you do something bad, you know. I come from a Puerto Rican family, you know. You get the correa, you know, and that was it. So I think Diaz, coming from that same demographic, that same background, we share a lot of similarities in that regard, and I think for me it was just more of a reflection of the choices I made, you know, in terms of bettering myself. And there are some variances, some deviations between me and Diaz, but I think that that's where the funness comes into play Diaz, or to become Diaz. So yeah, I think it's just more for me of helping me to understand I could have gone that route. Like I grew up with guys in my own neighborhood who are no longer with us. I remember one time being called to jury duty, um and I was sitting in the jury's box, and it was, I think it was a grand jury trial, and I was seeing images of these pictures, and I had to raise my hand. I said, I know like 8 of those guys. I can't be a part of this. And so for me, it's like that choice of, as you said, I think you said it earlier, that choice that you have to make this choice of path A or path B, and both will have their pros and cons. And I think both of these guys have that journey, because we do see young Dave, you know, making a choice, and then we see the older Dave making a different choice because of something that happened in his youth. And I think Diaz was in that same boat, and that's why Diaz and Heron got along so well. They understood each other. They spoke the same. They spoke the same kind of vernacular. You know, it was like, and he says it. You're my brother from another mother. That's what, it's exactly what he says. You know, so there was a kindredship there that I think, I have a lot of friends like that from back in the day, where it's like that. You know, so yeah,
And
definitely nostalgic for me. It was just more of a nostalgia reflection of the things that I could have done, almost have done, and yet didn't. And
yeah.
I, like I said, I'm a man of faith, so I can only go by God's grace that I was prevented from, you know, doing stupid things, you know.
And I want to add something to that. Like we also have to be mindful that everybody has some struggles, right? You don't ever see somebody who is living a life and they're like, no matter how wealthy you are, how successful you are, no matter where you're from, there is something that you're struggling with. It's a part of life. Life is going to have those things. So we see two people navigating life. They're in the same spot, in the same position, but they didn't walk the same path to get there. Right. So now we're seeing the struggle and the duality again. This guy came up this way, this guy came up that way. They could have gone this path, they chose different paths, but they're still here. And they're both battling with the scars of the journey to get to where they are. And they still have a long ways to go. And we're seeing that struggle on screen, that internal conflict in both these guys. It's very interesting.
And speaking of the path and the journey that the two characters have to continue on, how do you feel your characters might evolve? How do you think they might evolve in the series?
Well, without giving anything away, Dave is a guy who pretty much lived like 10 different lives, right? Like he's changed career a lot, but he's also grown tremendously. So I think where you see him, that was just him getting into the launch pad for the rest of his life, right? Like you saw where he was coming from, but he evolves into so much more. So much more happens to cause that evolution that you've not seen yet. And I think you guys are going to be excited about his journey, because he, like, looking back, like I just spoke to him on the phone just now, right? And we're talking about something that's actively happening in his life right now. But like, just seeing how he evolves as a person, it's crazy. Like, it is beyond, like, he, if you were playing the odds, he should have never been here. Just playing the odds, like, he should have never been here. Things happened to him that would, you know, you're gonna love it.
I can see that for sure. It was very the atmosphere that he grew up in, without giving away the show as well. Very, very difficult,
Yep.
very turbulent. And it's really beautiful to see a character start off from their childhood
Mm-hmm.
and then grow into young adult and find his way within his community, within a completely different country,
Mm-hmm.
and hold on to what he has learned and hold on to what he holds dear to him and what he holds dear to himself,
Right.
and to do his very best to not stray from that path.
There's nothing like it,
It's incredible.
because I, like, as all parents can say, like, whatever the core values that they taught you as a child, they hope that you don't depart from those values. So to see that in some cases the values won out over the present circumstance, it's a deeply gratifying feeling. As Joe was saying, he's a man of faith, so it could be nothing else but God, because there's certain circumstances where he should not have survived that, and he did.
Amen. And Joe, I would like to ask you as well, how do you see Officer Diaz evolving as the show continues?
That's another interesting question. And I don't have the vaguest idea. I think that if I were to highlight certain things, without detracting from the core theme, the core storyline, the through line of what From Yard is representing, I think that we can see more glimpses of his battle with alcoholism. I think that even in the pilot, he makes a reference about his father, when they're in the cop car. So seeing more glimpses of his own personal life apart from Heron, and seeing how that could be, kind of jargon here, the subplot of another episode of some sort, that it can kind of connect with the overall arching theme of that episode.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's different pathways that we can see here. I would love to see kind of the representation of the Puerto Rican culture through Diaz. That's one thing I would like to see more of. Some of these, these iconic things. I remember in the Zoom, I don't know if Chev remembers it, but in one of the Zoom rehearsals, Leland, our director, he incited us to do research on the music of that time period.
Yep.
And for me,
Yep.
I grew up in that time period. So I was just listing them off right there on the spot. The dance hall music, the club music, the salsa, the merengue, the bachata, all of these different things, that the sounds of these, and to be honest, when you think about Jamaica and Puerto Rico, Caribbean, they're we're Afro-Caribbean. We're all Afro-Caribbean.
Well,
And so
brothers,
there's a lot of that meshing.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's another reason why Diaz. And I mean, I went to a high school that was in Brooklyn, and I had a lot of friends that were Jamaicans, so for me, again, that was another connection why I was able to kind of connect this relationship between me and Chev, because I grew up with that. I grew up with that as a high school teenager.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, just I would love to see more of that representation of the Hispanic Puerto Rican culture, to bring in some of that demographic in as viewership, and it just increases the demographic.
Yep.
It is very uncanny. I was going to ask you about representation and what you've learned about Jamaican culture as seen in From Yard. So I I really love that you brought up that really good point. And so when I was watching the show, I felt so refreshed by the patois. I was so happy, and it just feels so authentic because you guys filmed in Jamaica,
Yeah.
and so you're surrounded by patois. You're surrounded by the culture, the people, the place. What was it like for you and the rest of the cast being immersed in the culture?
All right. So for me, being Jamaican, being born and raised in Jamaica, it was home. You know what I mean? Being able to see the Jamaican culture being represented on screen in the right measurement in each case was refreshing, because most times you don't see that. You see like a piece of it, a fragment of it, and it was either uh deeply watered down, or it was overdone to the point of ad nauseum. You're like, yeah, that's not how we do it. So to be able to and the same thing with Joe saying, the same thing, because there was an exchange where we both reverted to our mother tongue in that exchange, and it was natural. It's like me being able to code switch and say, okay, how a Bronx guy would sound. You want to be authentic. You don't want to, misrepresent somebody's culture. Culture is important, right? You don't want to misrepresent somebody's culture, because that is an offense to the people of that culture, right? It's who we are as a people. So filming in Jamaica, seeing the children, do what children did at the time in Jamaica, and they still do now, seeing, the B-roll, and seeing, the nature, the aspect of it, it was refreshing. So for me, it was a moment of pride to know that the story of a Jamaican is being told authentically. The people are being represented properly, and as Joe said, to have him, you know, Puerto Rican from New York representing a Puerto Rican from New York in a story that is so intimately meshed with people from all over the world and the Caribbean. It's beautiful. You don't want to see something happen and then you're like, oh my gosh, why couldn't there be? Nah, it's time we have the equal representation of all cultures where they need to be in the right measurement. And we did it. So I'm proud of that.
I agree 1,000,000%. And Joe, you talked about growing up around Jamaicans, and you talked about wanting to see more Puerto Rican representation in the series. My question is, being a part of From Yard, seeing the episode, what about Jamaican culture did you learn or find fascinating that was new for you?
Uh, I would have to say, for me it was, we have another castmate. I consider him a brother too, Darren. When Chev and Darren would talk on set, this is when we would have some downtime. It was again, it wasn't like they as Chev was saying, it wasn't like they shifted into this, they had this other vernacular, this other dialect, this other accent that was American or whatever. You just felt like you were surrounded by it. And for me, I don't think there was anything that I learned new, but it was reinforced of the kindredship that I as a Puerto Rican man, or as I grew up, recognizing New Yorican, coming from New York, that there are so many similarities between us and Jamaicans, and the way we think, the way our food, even, our seasoning.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So to me, it's just like, okay, these are my cousins, yes, from next door, so it wasn't much
empanadas,
different.
Jamaican patties, like, come on.
Yeah, empanada, yeah, exactly, empanadas. So for me, it's there's so many similarities. So it was more of a reinforcement than anything new. Again, I was surrounded by them growing up as a teen in my high school years, and some of them were, great friends of mine, and just that reinforcement of the love of food, the love of music, the love of people, the love of family. That's the other thing. So you see a universal theme going across, which is this thing, and I'll be honest, between my wife and I, my wife is a social butterfly. I'm not. I'm like, but so she would have parties up in this place all the time, and that's the thing. So it's about always family, 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 family. And I think that that's the kind of the understanding that I came into realizing. And again, nothing new, was just reawakened, and maybe possibly I would say reimagined in a different culture, in a different light for me. So if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. And with that being said, being on set, interacting with each other, you guys shared many, many fond memories of like funny moments and really like learning moments, moments of learning and understanding. And so I'm thinking of a question, but you know, with the urban setting in From Yard, you guys filmed in Georgia, New York City. So is there something unforgettable that you remember as you were filming in Georgia on set?
Oh yeah, like hell, man. So the first scene me and Joe had, we were outside. So we got outside and we were ready. Me and him were ready. We were warming up. We were, running lines and we were ready. But we went outside and the tech crew was setting up and it was cold. I think that listen, it was freezing. So I'm looking at Joe because he's from New York and I see him being just as cold as me. So I'm like, hey, buddy, come on. I thought you said you was from New York. He's like, yeah, but I lived in Florida for 20 years. I'm not from New York anymore. I left the cold behind. And we're just freezing. And at that point in time, I'm like, man, how do you do it? He's like, that's why I left. So we were just laughing and chopping it up while, it was really cold. Now it's like thinking back again, back to the point of, change and everything. I've been colder since, so I appreciate that coldness. I wish it was that cold when it's, like -5 now. But yeah, I mean, it was my first experience filming outside in that type of weather, and it was a learning curve. Mhm.
Yeah, for me, there were several moments that are definitely unforgettable. Um, and I think that in any experience there's always challenges. There's always kind of okay, how are we going to do this? And so, you know, we had a good cast and crew that we roll with the punches when certain things weren't working. And so when we when we adapted, you know, we had to change gears, we had to change this or that route this way. But there was one specific scene where we had to, I don't know if Chev remembers it, we had to knock on a door.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
We had to knock on a door, and we couldn't, so we were, and this was an abandoned school that we were filming at. And because we was using this location, and we were going up the steps, great, you know, stairs, but they were supposed to lead up to this one door, and we couldn't find a door because these were doors that were like had windows in it that looked like a school. And so, you know, Leland and I, we were like, okay, I said, brother, we need to find a better door because I ain't about to knock on that door that looked like a school. But we found ways, and so I think that's where the collaboration comes in, you know, where you may have had an idea in your mind of how the scene is going to work, but you know, something gets thrown in, a curveball gets thrown in, and you have to adapt. As an actor, you have to adapt, and you have to roll with it, and you have to kind of like, okay, this is it, this is what we're going to do. And that's the beauty of working with people who are committed, in my opinion, both crew and cast. And it was always a joy, you know, with the challenges, with the cold, with this or that, you know, it was always a joy to kind of come on set and work with both cast and crew. And even that sense of family, like I remember even craft services. I mean, there was a time when we were able to eat, you know, Caribbean food. And so it was just, for me, it was just like, we're being immersed into this, into this world, you know, constantly. And I think that was, I believe it was intentional. And I mean, I'm not a, you know, I hate to use this catchphrase, a method actor, but because I think every actor has a method, but but how, you know, mass media has put a negative connotation on it. But I think that in and of itself, just that, using the friendship and the closeness, that's what's more memorable to me. And that gets infused, whether subconsciously or consciously, it gets infused into the scenes, and it comes out. You could see it. You know, you could obviously see it.
Yeah, because me and Joe, like on lunch break, we would, you know, chop it up. We would talk about life and, you know, about just stuff, and we would be laughing and talking, and then 20 minutes later we're in a scene where we're doing the same thing as Dave and Diaz. So it's like the familiarity that we had as men, we brought it to the scene, and it felt authentic. You know, it wasn't like you're playing off a stranger, because we, you know, he would be talking about, you know, whatever he's doing, whatever project he's working on, and I'm talking about something, and then we click, we're talking about something in the scene, and it's like you're locked in.
Yeah.
Beautiful feeling. Playing opposite Joe was a privilege, because many times you're in a scene with another actor, and you find that you have to be doing a lot more to get them to give you what you need. And it's fine. You know, actors, we don't have a problem doing that. But when you have an actor who is right there with you in the scene, every moment in each frame, they're right there, that is the most beautiful experience, because you can become who you're meant to be, and you can exist in that moment as the characters with just no thought. It's just reflex. So it was beautiful.
Being a part of this really sounds like such a unique and very familial experience. And, you know, I would like to just thank the both of you today for joining and speaking to me about From Yard and your experiences, what you've learned, and what you even put into the characters that you played as Dave and Officer Diaz. So, thank you very much for joining me. And I'll wrap it up because I want to respect your time and everything. But I really appreciate everything that you've told me today. And I've learned a lot from you guys, and especially with getting into the headspace of playing a character, but also allowing the character to connect with parts of your life, as well as what it is to have a community on set and to know that you're not alone and you've got all these amazing and talented people working right beside you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's well said. Well said. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Take care.
All right.